This is Chris McCauley of Strategic Planning Group in Fishers, Indiana, and I'm being interrogated by Brian and Joshua on unexpected hobbies of financial advisors, and mine is homebrewing.
Welcome to Unexpected Hobbies of Financial Advisors, the podcast where we interview fellow financial advisors about their pursuits and pastimes beyond their professional persona, some of which may be surprising to their colleagues and clients. We're interested in what makes them tick and how their unexpected hobbies might or might not relate to their everyday lives. Here's our discussion with this week's guest. Welcome to the Unexpected Hobbies of Financial Advisors podcast. I'm Brian Wright with Fiduciary CFO, alongside my co-host and fellow financial advisor, Joshua Walker.
It's great to be here today.
Well, it's great that you're here, Joshua. Couldn't do it without you. Literally, I couldn't do this without you. So we all thank you.
Maybe you could. It'd be different. It would not be the same at all.
It wouldn't be good. So anyway, joining us today is Chris McCauley and his unexpected hobby, something I know a little bit about. I dabbled a bit in home brewing once upon a time. My neighbor actually was the home brewer, and I was the helper, which meant that I...
Quality control?
Yeah, pretty much. I stood in the garage for 6 hours on Saturdays and drank what we, wink, wink, what he made, 6 weeks prior. So it's a good helper gig if you can score one. But anyway, I'm not here to talk about it. Chris is here to talk about it. Thanks for joining us, Chris.
You're welcome. Thank you for the invite. Out of nowhere, yeah. My first ever podcast, gentlemen.
Well, congratulations. It is definitely uphill from here. How did you get into this hobby, and how long have you been doing it? At least 6 weeks, I'm guessing, if that's the generational cycle of a brew.
Yeah, I'm going to guess 15 years ago. Got 2 daughters, and I found myself, I just started a business, and all I did was work, run kids around, cook, shop, that sort of thing, and sleep. I need to do something else. So always been a beer guy, and, when the microbrewers came along, I really liked trying all of them. So I forget where the inspiration came from, but I went over to the local store, Great Fermentations. I said, I want to start this. So I went to brief class and, asked tons of questions as I was brewing in my kitchen. Brian, we do it on the kitchen stove. So I called them about 8 times. First time I made it. And it actually turned out, and it was very exciting. So, but yeah, I did something else besides work and sleep and running around. Yeah.
And if that goes back about 15 years, we're recording this in the summer of 2024 for all future historians watching this show, that takes us back to 2009-ish, which was a rough time to be getting anything off the ground.
Yeah. Yeah. Now that you throw that out there, it has gone fast. Yeah. I've been in my own business for over 15 and a half years now that you mention that. So it must be about 20 years I've been home brewing, because it was before I started the business.
And you said you took a class, so there would have been classmates with you going on the same journey at the same time?
Yes. Not that I kept in touch with them, but just very elementary, what is this bucket for, and what is a wort, and, what are all these ingredients? And they walk you through it step by step. And fortunately for someone like me, they're very much available for hand-holding through the first 2 or 3 batches you brew. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so somebody who knows nothing, what is a wort, and what was the bucket for?
Oh, it was a 5-gallon bucket, just like you guys probably painted in your life, right? 5-gallon paint bucket. That's what it is.
Home Depot.
Also, yeah, the primary fermenter is what it becomes. They stick a hole in the top, and then the yeast, as it ferments, bubbles up through this little plastic thing. But to go backwards a little bit, the 5-gallon bucket is the primary fermenter. The wort, as you boil some water, spring water, not regular water, not mineral water, not distilled water, spring water. And on the stove, we did it, Brian. You were more sophisticated doing it in the garage.
The big turkey burner and a big a converted keg. Really, it was fantastic. The guy was like MacGyver. He could do everything.
Yeah, I'm not.
Still can, but yeah.
Yeah, that's quite the setup. He probably built it himself too.
Yeah,
he's got those kinds of skills. So yeah, the first thing you do is boil the water to, I don't know, about 160, and then you dump in all the grains. Then, you let them sit about a half hour, 40 minutes, and then you put in the sugars, the malts, and this becomes the wort, sort of your base for the beer. And that boils for about an hour, actually. And you have to be extremely careful. And as I've done this 3 or 4 times, if it boils over, which happens very rapidly in about 10 seconds, it's all over your stove. And it's a lot of sugar and a lot of stickiness.
Oh, yeah, that's a real mess. What you've described going in there and the volume of stuff that it takes a long time to get going. And then all of a sudden,
It's a whole lot of
Yeah,
oatmeal.
the sugars, the grains come back out, and then the sugars go in, and bring it to a boil. But in about 5 seconds, 3 seconds, you have to stand there and watch it. Don't take your eyes off it, and then you just turn the burner down quickly or move it off. Otherwise, it goes all over, and yeah, it's a 25-minute stove cleaning project.
and back to square one, then that's
No,
not
you just keep going. You
salvageable.
leave the mess because the board
Okay.
has to boil, and one of the big things is sanitation, the bacteria. I do it in high school, some at college. I was a cook and a baker, so sanitation and food is a big, big deal, and it still is when you're making beer. So no, you don't set the beer aside. You keep it going, and it's just the mess you'll have to clean up later.
If you get it to 160, though, from my recollection of pasteurization charts, you only need to hold it at 160 for about 5 seconds before you've sterilized what's ever in there, right? Or
Yeah,
is the problem what comes next?
well, yeah, that's for the to dump the grains into the water, and after those kind of soak the water for about a half hour, Josh. Well, then you put the sugars in, and you bring it to a boil, which is closer to 220. And then it sits on the boil for, you get this big burst. It just hit boil, and, it can explode out of uh, the pot.
Right.
And then you boil for usually about an hour. And depending upon the hops, the brew you're making, the hops, various types of hops go in at the beginning of that next 60 minutes. Or, maybe it's 20 minutes in, maybe it's with 10 minutes left, 3 minutes left, and it just depends on the beer. Yeah, the sequencing of the hops is during that 1 hour at somewhere, boiling point, 220, I think it is, 200. You would know better than I think. Yeah.
It depends on how rich your concentration is. The more you dump in there, then the more you get your 1.8 degrees per mole or whatever. My daughter just finished chemistry. She could tell us, but yeah, so somewhere like that. But a good thermometer will help you. So then if all goes well and you don't end up with napalm all over your stovetop, what's supposed to happen next?
All right. After the wort, that's what it calls as it's boiling. That is the wort. Base almost, kind of if you were making gravy. You guys ever make gravy on Thanksgiving Day?
I've seen it done.
Or seen it done? That's kind of the wort,
Oh, yeah.
for beer. And, it starts out with water and some juice drippings, and you throw in some flour. That's your base. You kind of think of as your wort for gravy. So the wort for beer then, once it boils for about an hour, we have to quickly cool it. In the old days, we just throw it in a utility tub and on ice, and it would just sit there, this soup pot in the ice. They call it what did they call that? Not a bath,
Ice bath.
ice, but ice bath. Ice bath. So you're trying to cool this down as fast as possible, because the slower it goes, the more likely you'll have bacteria growing. The bacteria will ruin the entire batch.
Okay. It's the transition zone from very hot to very cold
Yeah.
is the danger area. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, trying to cool it to about 80 degrees, actually, from 200, 220, as fast as possible. And what they developed was this copper tubing, which my wife bought me one Christmas, and you hook it up to your in the old days, my sink in my new house is my garden hose, outside now. Now I'm outside, Brian.
You've been banished.
Yeah.
Leave my stovetop alone.
It's got no threads on my bathroom sink or my new house. Anyway, so I take it outside. It sits in the bath, run the hose out, hook it up, just like a garden hose to anything. and the cold water pumps through the copper tubing, which is probably a foot high, and it's just a circle. So you've got this cold water now in the middle of the wort, and we're going through the copper tubing sitting in the wort, and then it cools it down probably about 10 to 15 minutes versus, say, a half hour, 40 minutes. So that the
Sure.
chances of bacteria growing become a lot less. But, that copper tubing, it has to sit in a solution with some stuff that kills germs and bacteria. Nothing that
Yeah.
touches the wort or the beer, can just come off, the kitchen counter and go in there. It has to go into this solution to be sanitized. That I've learned. His sanitation's a big deal.
So if you do goof up the sanitation, you don't properly sterilize your copper or whatever, how will you know that something has gone amiss? Is it when you land in the ER, or is it sooner than that?
Probably, after that step, it cools down about 80 degrees. Then you get your paint bucket out, your 5-gallon primary fermenter, and it's got to be sterilized with the solution on the inside, and you pour the wort into the 5-gallon bucket. And then at the same time, the yeast, which has been sitting on the side here, there's dry yeast, liquid yeast, different kinds, put that in at that time. And also, we're making a 5-gallon batch. I'm usually about 4.5. It's just worked better for me. But you're putting in gallons of spring water now to bring, you had about 2.5 gallons in the wort, which is boiled down a little bit. Then when you put it in the paint bucket, you're putting the yeast in as well as the remaining water, spring water. And then you put the lid on, which has been sanitized, and then the thing on top that accepts the bubbles from the yeast as it begins to ferment, meaning eat the sugar. At that point, you'll see bubbles. If the batch goes wrong, to answer your question, Josh, well, you'll see bubbles, and they're sort of like, they're not clear water bubbles. They're now, they have color, or this stuff starts pumping up out of the top of the 5-gallon bucket. Instead of it water, lightly bubbling, that we now have like this foam coming through, which has happened once. The bacteria got in there, it's batch is ruined, you got to throw it away.
Okay. That makes sense.
That's how I found out. And I think, in fact, the current batch, somewhere something got in there, but it brewed well. It tastes great, but when you pour it out, 6 weeks later, 2 months later, you get a lot of foam. It's very drinkable, but instead of a 12-ounce bottle, I usually bottle mine. You've got about 9 ounces of beer. As I tell people, open it up over your kitchen sink, because it just goes over. But nobody's got sick yet. Nobody's got sick yet. Yeah.
And that can happen too if you're bottling, because you have to sterilize every bottle. So it's possible one doesn't get as sterile as the others. So one, you would have an issue where it's, you have that reaction where one bottle goes bad versus when I had done it, he kegged it. He put it in, in like pony kegs. And so then that's all or none. Like that has to be spotless and sterile every square millimeter inside, because if not, then you're pouring 5 gallons down the driveway, which is, you only need to do once before you get really, really particular around your sterilization habits.
Yes, exactly, Brian. Yeah, very particular, because you got doing all this, you got everything going, and you don't want to just mess it up by not sterilizing. Yeah.
And then one primary fermenter's worth of fluid will give you what, 52, 53 bottles? Did I get my math right?
No, actually it is. I usually come up with somewhere around 40 to 45, during the boil process. Some of that liquid boils away. And then, I don't know, I just came up short, once, and then it tasted good. So I've always, put more like 4.5 gallons of water or liquid into the whole thing instead of 5. So
it's not a mysterious shrinkage. Oh my gosh, I'm 10% short on my beer. What happened? It's actual, you do it on purpose that way.
Yeah. Not like my old days as a financial analyst, and okay, exactly. We lost 10% of our production. Where'd it go? To find
Who can
that.
say?
Yield is low. It's under budget. Yeah.
And Brian has mentioned doing this in a neighborly fashion with friends. Do you have people that enjoy doing this with you, or is it mostly just enjoying the final product?
Well, as far as doing it, a couple people wanted to do it with me. It just didn't work out timing wise. And I find myself usually doing it not as much anymore, sort of last minute the night before. Yeah, I do have 2 or 3 hours to do it tomorrow. So, but yeah, I definitely share it because I don't drink 42, 45 bottles of beer anymore by myself.
Sure, sure. Well, you mentioned that your kids were young 15 or 20 years ago. As they've grown up in the house, have they developed an interest in the workings of it? And now that they've aged into majority, do they get to enjoy it as well with you?
A little bit of an interest, yeah, and especially in the bottling. As I heard from Brian, I've never kegged, so I bottle. So yeah, they've helped me a few times on the bottling side, but they really have no interest in drinking it. Even the now 21-year-old, she's had some beers, but yeah, not a big fan. But I think one thing we added to years later was instead of just giving out brown bottles of beer, as I went online and had labels made up, and then people are like, wow, this is fantastic, a label did that, yeah. So
Okay, and I'm guessing you don't have a license to sell. That would
no,
require
I
all
don't
sorts
sell
of
anything. No, I
yeah, yeah,
no.
and no farmers markets or anything.
No, nothing like that. It's a hobby. I'm an amateur brewer. That's it. And other people I know have kept spreadsheets of every batch. I don't do any of that. This isn't work. I do enough of that at work, spreadsheet work and tracking things and keeping on top of everything. I don't need this in a hobby. So, I heard 6 weeks, but sometimes that primary fermenter should sit there for about a week or 5 to 7 days, something like that. And then you move it to a secondary fermenter, which is a big glass jar. In the old days, you guys, people would throw pennies and nickels and quarters into those things. And after about 15 years, they might have, $8,000 in there or something. But then it sits there for usually 2 weeks. But many times, it would sit in the primary for twice as long as you're supposed to because I couldn't get to it, or the secondary for another 2 or 3 weeks beyond what it was supposed to. And, as a friend told me, it's beer. We've been making it for 2,000 years. It'll be fine. It's fine. It works
Yeah,
fine. Yeah.
they used to ship it around the world on sailing ships.
Yeah.
It would take weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks to get to its destination.
It's meant to be stable once it
Yes.
reaches a certain point. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And do you get to share this with not just friends, but colleagues and clients as well? Or do you
Yeah.
not try to poison your work relationships?
Well, I found out which clients don't drink pretty fast. Yeah. Most of them are, happy to try it. And I'm happy to say the batches have turned out, except for the occasional warning, open it up over your sink. It does taste good. And it was the labels. People were really impressed by that. It was like, I just jumped, in their heads as far as the quality of the product just by having a cool label on them.
What is it about these labels that's so game changing?
Isn't that something? It looked like, something you'd see at a store instead of something Chris brewed in his basement or, on his kitchen stove. Yeah. I think
So it's not like a garage sale sticker that you just slapped on there. It's a proper, real. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So
can get some laying around there because I'll pass it out to clients and I'll have to slap a sticker on it before I give it to them. Yeah. But yeah.
So now that you're not consuming 42 bottles of beer like you used to and pace that you used to, I presume you're making it less. So if you're making it less, are you finding you're going back to the same kind of the old standards, the old faithful recipes, or are you still kind of trailblazing, trying new things?
Great question. Yeah. It's Belgian double. I'd never had a Belgian beer in my life. And that was one of the first ones I made. It recommended that at the store. And Actually, the recipe for that came from a guy who opened up beer brewing, a couple doors over from Great Fermentation. So I still have that recipe, and that's the one, the go-to actually. And that's the one that that was really good. So that one I keep going back to. I'm not as experimental with different things as I used to be. I don't brew as much either. But I'm not an IPA guy, so it's usually the Belgian doubles. It was in, what is it? The Kolsch. Kolsch is also that goes over well in the summer too. The Kolsch.
Mm-hmm.
And what is the third one? Tank Steven, which is an imitation of Tank 7, a little hoppier actually, but that went over well too. I'll probably make that one in September, actually, to take Steven. But it is a little hoppier. But yeah, the Belgian double, I don't know if we'll get to it this fall. So without a doubt, the Belgian double is the favorite. Yeah.
So when you're out in a social setting and enjoying commercial brews, do you have a fresher appreciation for what's going on inside the bottle, or are you able to enjoy it blank, unimpacted by your work?
Definitely a fresher appreciation. And like I related earlier, being a cook and a baker, when you go to a restaurant or somebody's house and somebody makes it, I really appreciate it, because to make something from scratch and make it good, it's not the easiest thing. It takes some care, some love, some caring about the end product, a great deal of it, in fact. So yes, I do have a greater appreciation for brewers who come up with these, doesn't have to be weird, but really good tasting beers that are unique.
And have you ever traveled specifically in pursuit of this hobby, gone on the tour of Belgium to see straight from the source what it's like, or is that in the future yet?
There's a beer app, a soccer dad introduced me to, and I just forgot the name, Untapped. So as we travel, with soccer and whatever tournaments we're in or wherever we are, I didn't always hit a microbrewery, but if I did, yeah. And certainly around Indianapolis, and I'm up in Chicago. I'm from there originally with clients and family. So, or just any store, But yeah, I've hit 1,000 different beer brews in February on that.
Wow, that's a lot of bumper stickers. Maybe we should start asking people if there's an app that pertains to their hobby, because this is not the first time that somebody said, yeah, there's an app for every city I go to. There's another pinball bar.
Yeah.
Well, I like to ask about conferences. I'm always like, is there a Michael Kitces of your hobby? And I don't actually know this question about your hobby, but I know there's like really vibrant online communities.
Yeah.
So are you, or like the recipes that you get, are you finding those, are you sourcing those like from these online communities of other brew makers, or just your friends down at Great Fermentations here?
A little more my friends at Great Fermentations. Now that I have more time, the second one's going away to college. Maybe, Brian, I'll get online and get into this a little bit more, but it was more definitely the time factor. Yeah, I'm haven't started to figure this out, but I'm going to have more free time, which I'm well aware of, but I haven't figured out what to do. I'm still on this, where do I have to be this week kind of thing. But one thing to take on that, my wife has traveled overseas, and so she winds up in Oktoberfest in Munich on one of her business trips. And she goes, "Oh, Chris would love this." So we went there for my 50th. She was right. I love it. Yeah.
Nice.
So much so I'm going back for my 60th in about a month, actually. 5 weeks. Yeah. So a lot of good German beers in Germany. Yes. Yeah. And they know how to serve a beer.
Yeah.
In glass. Yeah.
That's what I always thought was fascinating to travel abroad, is when you get a beer, whatever you're drinking is in a glass of what you're drinking. I mean, you order a Guinness here, it comes to you in a Miller Lite glass. It's funny. Like,
what?
Well, I guess Guinness is a bad example. If you order, Guinness always comes in a Guinness glass. So I picked the one beer that's the worst example. Yeah, you order a Miller Lite, it comes in a Coors Light glass. Like, because owners of bars just get those for free, and just use whatever because somebody needs a glass to drink.
Marketing swag, yeah.
But yeah, there seems to be a little more concern internationally, at least where I've consumed malted hops.
I've seen the
Whatever
same.
you're drinking is in a glass
Yeah.
of that brand.
Yep. Yeah, certainly in Ireland with the Guinness and in Germany, this a couple times. You go to not just Oktoberfest, you go to a bar and you order 3 different beers and they each come in a glass that's pristine, like clean, and matches the beer they poured you or give you the can. Yeah.
I'm a career changer out of the dairy industry, and we appreciate what we make as well. But you guys are going to laugh at me, but you don't get to go to some foreign country and go to a bar and get a nice frozen mug of a quality 1%. That's not done. It's not cool for grown-ups to order an ice cold milk and enjoy it, but it would be better out of a cold glass because everything's better out of a cold glass.
Right.
Even if it says Guinness on the side. Are there special moments and memories out of this 20-year hobby coming on that you look back on, not just the disasters on the stovetop, but special memories that you think of from your own brewing, not necessarily traveling to Germany, but a special memory that you have from the hobby?
Wow. It was nice because I could say to my wife, "I'm brewing today," and then I could watch the football games too, and that was acceptable. It's just instead of just watching the football games. Yes.
Right. So that batch that I brewed when the Colts won the Super Bowl, go Peyton. That was a special memory.
It may not seem special or forever, but it was nice to be able to watch football games while I'm doing the brewing. Yes. In fact, I'm over at Great Fermentations, and what's her name? Anita. She was the original owner. I think she's since sold to her son, but she was a beer expert, a judge, and she was the highest level. They're called cicerones in brewing, sommeliers in wine. And I said, when's your busiest time around here? She goes, about 12:30 before a Colts game. Because all these guys rush in because I'm going to brew and watch the Colts,
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So since you're a baker, do you do anything with the grain when it's left over? Have you
No.
made any bread or anything
Nothing.
like that?
Not that I never even thought about that, Brian. Yeah.
Oh, it's great. It's
Really?
super, super dense, as you'd imagine. It reminds me a little bit of like the bread you get in Ireland. I know it's brown, because of course.
Okay.
But yeah, you should do it. Check the internet, of course. Everything's on the internet. You can get a recipe. Yeah.
I will try that.
Yeah.
There's a cattle feed, dried distillers' grains. And I'm guessing you people are the source for dried distillers' grains because you've distilled the grain and then the byproduct is a useful, stable feed for dairy cattle. That making all these connections here. All right. Have there been any lessons that you've learned from the process of going through this that would be applicable to the world of financial advising and what you do during your day job?
Oh, I think the attention to detail, that's it, and as I was mentioning earlier, you make something from scratch, has to be an attention to detail and a love, and you got to love the end product and not just sort of get through it and it's done and that's okay. So I think with advising and with clients, yes, it's the same kind of very much the same approach that we have to be prepared for meetings. It has to be, the attention to detail has to be there, and then the end product we hope is a happy client, as you two know, and we refer more people to us because they're very happy with the quality of the work. So that would be it.
And if not, you can help them drown their sorrows, I guess.
If not, take a couple of beers. I can't drink 42 of these. Yeah.
Yeah. Bear market lager.
The VIX is at 60. Let's crack one open. So if somebody wanted to start getting into this for themselves, but didn't necessarily want to dive deep into the hardware expense, where should they go about getting information to go on an exploratory journey?
I think if there's a local shop, that helps out homebrewers, that would be my number one recommendation. Of course, there's always online and there's outfits that'll ship you everything you need. Rather than going like lots and lots of things, you don't need to walk into a store to get started. But I think as I mentioned, the hand holding, which, as you two know, in our world, that's a big deal, the hand holding, because everything's online, but that doesn't mean you understand it. You think you're doing it right. So I think if you can get some personal attention from a local shop or somebody who's been doing it, that would be the best way to get started.
And the fondness that you speak of these friends that you've met at the local store, it sounds like it could be a rather generous and sharing community that are eager to bring more folks in.
Yeah, they are. I mean, I think it's kind of crested the peak of homebrewing, and things are slower over there when I do go in there versus there's, 8 customers. And the thing is, I learned, and much like our business, there's more than one way to do things to get people where they want to be. And I've learned, in fact, there were 3 of them who worked at the store, and I've worked with each of you and asked you different questions, and you each gave me 3 different sets of answers.
Well, it depends.
No, one guy goes, "Well, yeah, if you ask 13 of us, you get 13 different answers." I didn't know that, but he just sort of like cooking and with home brewing, and people who start restaurants or come up with a great recipe, they went off course at some point, and came up with their own imagined tastes. And that's what makes those special. And you might even say that in our business, maybe clients say that about us. They care about us. They came up with this just for me. And you see that with brewing. If I'm trying a new brewer, I'm someplace, drinking it there at the microbrewery or restaurant. And really appreciate when somebody figured this out to come up with this particular end product.
And do you, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, what I think's interesting about, because we've talked before about, baking as a science and cooking as an art. And I like to cook because even, it's guardrails. It kind of, as long as it kind of keeps you stay in between the lines, every batch of chili can be different. And I enjoy that. It's interesting trying with creativity with beer making because it is a science. It's weird. It's like you have to find the creativity, but still very much stay within those like sanitary lines. And like, you can't just like, well, let's throw this in there and see what happens, because there's still a lot of rules that need to be followed. So it's almost like the creativity that comes out of beer making, the people that do kind of push the envelope a little bit and come up with something that's different. I really give those people credit because they had a lot of constraints to work with to try to, squeeze out some creativity.
Mm-hmm.
Now that we've done 15 or 20 of these episodes where there's recurring themes, that whole right brain, left brain creativity within guardrails keeps on coming up. That makes sense.
Yeah.
What words of wisdom or words of warning would you give to yourself way back that you would have found helpful as you've moved forward on this journey?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Stay thirsty.
Pardon me?
Stay thirsty.
Yeah. Be open-minded, be willing to try different ways of doing things. Yeah, obviously some of it's going to work, some of it won't, but that doesn't matter. You got to try it.
And based on what you've said, I'm guessing you haven't gone out and built a web page or a social media presence for your creations. It's strictly in the real world, friends and family. If somebody heard this and wanted to find out more about Chris and his brews, they'd have to be local. They're up a creek.
Yes, on both counts. They'd have to be local or they'd be up a creek. You're right. Although the soccer dad, I think he's got 5,000 entries on tap. He created McCauley Brewing on tap. That would be the only social media presence of McCauley Brewing. But there is one because he created it because that's fine. Thank you, Bill. Yeah, but it wasn't a top priority of mine. But yes,
if only you had digital natives inside the house.
It's cool to get on Untapped and see McCauley Brewing. I think he's the only one who put entries on there.
So do you commission any work, or do you have friends or folks that say, hey, next time you make this, hold 6 of these back for me?
I have, and it's on the Belgian Double. Yeah, that's the brew. Yeah.
I recall one time I was the helper, of course, he did a triple, which then you can make a double and then you can make a common out of it. I don't recall the process exactly, but it's like the first pass is going to have the most sugar, so it's going to have the most, the highest alcohol, and that's the triple.
Yeah.
I mean, stop me if I've misremembered that, but is it with, if you start with a double, can you then do another kind of pass through and make more of a common? Common's like a regular drinker, like a daily drinker, garage beer,
Yeah.
Have you done that process at all?
No, that's a bit over my head, Brian.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe I'll have
he was-
more time to, experiment like that.
Yeah. Very good.
Yeah, the nice thing about the weird thing about the Belgians is, the alcohol content is higher, but it doesn't taste like, like if you ever had an imperial ale or bourbon something, the alcohol is 10 to 13%, whereas a Belgian,
Whoa.
yeah, if I have one, I have it at home, and so I'm not driving anywhere. Yeah, they hit you harder than you think, actually. But the Belgians, whatever it is, 7-8%, as you were mentioning, the triple and the double. The triple is a higher alcohol, but it doesn't taste like it. Where I think the bourbon, and those imperial stouts and whatnot, they taste like it to me. I don't know what the Belgians figured out, but it's pretty cool what they figured out. Yeah.
This has been really interesting, and I'm sure we could talk about chemistry and sanitation all day long. But if somebody wanted to learn more about the work that you do professionally, where would they find you and learn about your day job?
Oh, online, we do have a website, the firm, sbgfinancial.com. And, you can learn a little bit about me and my background. We've been here locally now, the firm, about over 20 years. I joined up, started my own practice as part of this firm about over 15 years ago. So there's some background information there. Just to bore you two, yeah, I changed careers like you, Joshua. I was not a dairy farmer. I'm a CPA, so I did the auditing, and then I headquarters in Chicago, Quaker Oats and Meritech Finance Accounting. And right where I wanted to be when I left college, and I can't do this for 30 years. So I changed careers. My wife's from Indiana, from a farm, and Indianapolis was good. So I moved here, changed careers, worked for a couple small firms, got the CFP designation, and learned about the field. And maybe these are some of the things you've also gone through, Joshua, except for the moving
Very
from
similar.
Chicago. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I found something I like to do, and I love it. Yeah. It's worked out well. And actually the part about starting my own business was never part of the plan. I never wanted to do that. But I decided I had to have my clients and work the way I wanted to do things. We're fiduciaries. And, when you're a CPA, as you might know, Brian, you're married to one, they kind of beat that into you, independence and objectivity. And that's how this practice runs. That's almost the definition of fiduciaries, looking out for the client's best interest too. So it's worked out well. And Carrie Zerl is with me, and she's also a CPA. She's the tax expert. It's not me. And she's got a career in taxation, for God's sake. She's got a master's in it, which is total geekdom, and even in the CPA world, But it's worked out
people.
great.
We need them.
Clients love it, and we love our clients. So, yeah, very happy with how things have progressed. Yes.
Yeah, our industry is, we scream from the rooftops, oh, we need to get, we need the next generation, and there's all this effort to go out to the schools and try to grow new financial planners. But if you look around, most of the best financial planners, like, we were all career changers. So it's like, why isn't there a better effort towards career changers? I don't know how how you talk to career changers as a group. It's not like there's a meeting that they go to every quarter or anything. But it seems like that's a better, maybe not better, but maybe equally, there should be some efforts towards getting those career changers, because we've you can point to every firm, you can point to a career changer that's one of their rock stars. And I'm not even talking just not necessarily in the planning role. Certainly, that's true, but in the assistant roles and the admins and back office folks, I mean, it's just hire smart people. They can learn what we do. Heck, we did. You know?
Yes, I agree with you. Hire smart people, or who are very interested in this, and if they career transitioned into this, highly likely they're very interested in this profession.
Right.
And I'm happy to say, from when I started, 25 years ago now, it is way more of a profession than it was then. Way more. Yeah. And I didn't know and I've shared this many times, I didn't even know what a profession was, because they beat that into you as well, being a CPA and being a professional and whatnot. And, and then I got into this field, and then I know what they meant, because there was way too many unprofessionals in this field. But it's way better, and that's good for the public. Quarter century later. Yeah.
It's all that beer drinking we do, right? From those darn brewers. Putting that beer in front of us, right? Anyway, this has been really cool. Thank you, Chris, for coming on and telling us more about the wonderful, unexpected hobby of home brewing.
Thanks so much, Chris.
Oh, you're welcome. And offline, I want to learn more about this dairy farming. That's a hard business. I've heard from my wife and a couple of friends she grew up with. That's
It
a
sure
rough
is.
one.
Yeah, nobody career changes into dairy. That's not a thing. So
Yeah, similarity. There's a ton of BS in both industries, right?
piled higher and deeper. PhD.
That's right. Thanks, Chris.
See ya. Thank you.
All right, gentlemen.
Unexpected Hobbies of Financial Advisors is brought to you by Fiduciary CFO, forward-thinking tax and planning solutions for business owners, like RIA firms and their business owner clientele. The opinions of Brian, Joshua, and their guests are for entertainment purposes and should not be construed as legal, tax, financial, or investment advice. You should know better than to take any of this content seriously. Thanks for being a fan of the show. If you were listening and thought to yourself, hey, I know somebody they need to have on the show, you can do something about that. Go to unexpectedhobbies.com/nominate and tell us who they are and what they do that's so interesting and unexpected. If we agree, we'll send them an invitation and we'll hope they say yes. That's unexpectedhobbies.com/nominate.